Good evening, everybody. I think we're going to get started. Welcome to tonight's Visiting Artist Lecture Series. It's part of the Low-Res MFA program. I'm Laura Hughes, co-chair, along with Jody Cavalier, and we're really excited to introduce Joanna Powell today, who's visiting us from Montana. This is the fifth in a series of 7 lectures. So next week we'll have A.K. Burns. The following week, Shannon Stratton. That one will be on a Tuesday, just to give you guys a heads up. So yeah, we're halfway through our summer intensive, and I think our students are still alive and kicking, so this is great. And also thank you to Roger, who's brought your youth group here, so it's great to see you guys at our lecture series. Okay, and with that, I'm going to introduce Amy Philippine, who's a student who will do a little bit more thorough introduction of the artist. So, thank you.
Good evening, my name is Amy Philippine, and I'm a first-year low-res student here at PNCA. And it is my pleasure to introduce Joanna Powell, visiting artist for tonight from Helena, Montana. She received a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Ceramics from the University of North Texas and her Master of Fine Arts in Ceramics from the University of Colorado at Boulder. Joanna has exhibited her work throughout the U.S., including the Archie Bray Foundation in Helena, Showpen Gallery in Denver, and the Center for Contemporary Craft in Pittsburg. She recently was named a 2015 NCECA Emerging Artist. And in learning about Joanna, what stood out most as I listened to a previous lecture she had given was her honesty and openness about her practice. During her lecture, she had said, like all artists, I wake up and have the courage to start from nothing each day. She also said, I'm constantly having to say to myself, trust yourself. And it never ceases after I finish a piece that I ask myself, can I do this again? Will it ever be good again? Thank you, Joanna, for those words. Please welcome Joanna Powell.
Hey, thanks for coming. Let's see. Play from start. Okay. I think about I titled this Beauty is a Struggle because there's one quote from Jessica Stockholder that I think about continually, and it says, she says, beauty is a struggle, a stretching of what's comfortable aesthetically, and so bright, but I'll get used to it. But I think about this a lot, like what is uncomfortable, or what is beautiful, or what makes me feel something, and that's what I think about beauty, what beauty is maybe, but this is me when I was 7 years old, 6 or 7, and I was so terribly shy when I was younger that my younger brother, who's 4 years younger than me, I would ask him to go like buy a Coke for me or whatever at the pool, and and he was so short he had to get up on the counter, but I was like, what was I afraid of? I don't know, but I was so shy. I was always like ducking out of everything and never wanted my picture taken. And I think I'm still maybe a little bit like that, but I'm better now. But this is my family, and I think that, I was always kind of playing with mud and dirt, and I would love to sit outside in the backyard, and we had this tower, like my dad drug home this, I called it a tower, but later on I realized it was actually really small, but I would sit and make mud pies all around this tower, like for hours till I went all the way around, then I'd stack them back up, dump them off the edge, and start again. And I remember making this, and I actually called my mom and was like, hey, can you go find this on the mantle and take a picture of it and send it to me? So she did, and she was like, there's only 4 people, and there's 5 people in our family. And I was like, well, maybe, I don't know, maybe I left JT out, or maybe he wasn't born yet, or maybe I didn't like him at the time, I don't know. But she was like, I guess that's me with the boobs, but it's survived all this time. And this hallway has a lot of memory for me. It was the hallway, like down at the end was my parents' bedroom and my sister's and I's bedroom on, I don't know what side that is, and then my brother's bedroom, but it acted as like a runway, a haunted house, and all these other things. I remember taping all these fake Madonna videos with my sister that we would like reenact it and dance down the hallway. I want to find those tapes. I don't know where they are, but probably incriminating. But that carpet is like 50 years old because it's still like that. It's never been replaced. It's like old wool carpet that's like moth-eaten and got a trail down. There's a trail everywhere through the house, and it's uncomfortable, but it's comfortable, which, if that makes any sense. And this is my mom and dad, and that was recently my dad when I last went home. The kitchen sink always clogs. It's like an old house and like roots all through the pipes, and he was pouring some horrible toxic acid down there, which is, I know it's not eco-friendly, but like that was the only way. But he was like, I gotta go get my acid goggles, and they're just these old welding goggles from the garage, and he puts them on. And that's my mom. She just looks so beautiful in this picture. I think she was like right out of, I don't know, college age, but I don't know, like the higher the hair, the closer to God or something like that. I was like, how long did that take you to do your hair like that? And she was like, it took me no time at all because we were so like in the practice of doing it. But that's my dad. I think him, like, he's probably the reason why I continued on this path, even though he told me not to be an artist. Like, he was like, you should probably get a job that like makes money, like probably all your parents maybe said to you at some time. But no, that's not the case. But he always went to any kind of weird movie I wanted to see, or art museums with me. He was very interested in what I was interested in, so I think that was really nice, and you know, and he's sweet, and more like, I think of my dad sort of as my muse in a strange way, because he's so eccentric, and I think probably that's why I'm a little crazy too. But like this was an oleander plant that I planted at my parents' house, and after I left, like, he kept taking care of it and watering it and giving it food and stuff. And then he's like a kind of a junk collector guy or whatever, and he found all these old baby cribs. And I came home, I was like, this looks crazy, Dad. I was like, everybody around you probably thinks you're insane. And he would like put a light under it and put a sheet over it. And so I think a lot of him, and then he forgot about it, and the light was on, and the heat from summer was, you know, blaring down and killed the oleander plant back down to a stub. And so he was like, well, I'm sorry, Joanna. I was like, well, he loves to love things to death. And I think that's a good idea, or that's like an interesting title. I sort of like absorb titles from him, so I'm like, to love something to death. That's currently what I'm like thinking about. And I started on this like tropical fruit series when I moved to Montana, and maybe it's because it's so not tropical, like it's so dry. I felt like I was like a crispy critter drying up, and like I'd never have used oil on my body in my life until I moved to Montana. I was like, Jesus, it's so dry. But anyway, I started making all these fruits, and I think it was in some sense to like welcome myself to the state of Montana, or welcome myself to a place. And I was making like tons of pineapples. I think that maybe that's what the reason is now, but I'm still not really sure, and it's like 2 years later. So sometimes, you know, you never may know. I don't know, or it's kind of getting clarified. And I do a lot of sort of, I don't really sketch a lot, but sometimes I do. And I'm thinking about this idea. The title of this is Pantry Hose. Drawing and painting is a pretty big part of my practice. And it's this idea that I want to take photographs of like shoving plants in pantyhose that I'm wearing. And I've been thinking about it, and I don't know why. Maybe I'm just not brave enough, or I don't understand it yet to do it, but I'm going to shove plants in pantyhose and wear them, take pictures of them. So that's what that is. But I started, I guess, about 3 years ago working on this self-portrait series. And I avoided it forever. I feel like I'm saying that a lot about everything I do, that I am nervous or avoid things forever until I do them. And I actually was thinking, oh gosh, self-portraiture is so vain and, you know, just like weighted. But then I'm like, no, it's actually the easiest, but it's the hardest to do, to actually expose yourself. You know, I think that's what I was afraid of, like painting these things that I you know, of what's inside of us. So I think this kind of came from that hallway portrait of being like this scared tiny person, you know, of the whole world. And I don't really admit this a lot, but I painted this after I taught a class that was really terrible. But it was like, I felt so small and so stupid that I like went back to my studio and was like, oh my God, like what. But so and it came out like, sometimes things just come out so fast and easy, and sometimes work takes a long time, and this was one that was like fast and easy, and I felt like and it's like small, like what's 12 by 7 or something, I don't know. But that's my hair. I chronically save all my hair that I cut off my head. Like I don't know. After having curly hair, it's really hard to trust anybody to cut your hair because it just turns into like a weird ball shape usually. That's something I have to admit. So that is why I cut my own hair, so I don't have to be angry at anyone, I think. Maybe it's OCD, I don't know. But this is my parents' kitchen window, and it looks the same to this day. It's kind of like a tomb. Their whole house is sort of like a tomb, but only it has a lot more junk in the tomb now. And that's a cicada, or a Texas cicada. I realize they look a lot different other places everywhere in the world, but that sound of a cicada, in Montana we don't have them, but when I went back I lived in Kansas for a year, Manhattan, Kansas, and they had cicadas, and like instantly the moisture and the smell and the cicadas made me feel like home. And so I kind of I associate this with home and it being this perpetual place. And I am always like longing to go back to that place, but it doesn't exist anymore. You know, you can never go home. Like, it sucks. It's really sad to say. You can't. But me and a friend of mine, Zimmer Peled, when I was at the Archie Bray Foundation in Helena, we were hungry for venues to display our work, and there's only one gallery in town. We're like, okay, so what do we do about this? And there was a prison museum in Deer Lodge, Montana, and so we went and toured this prison and then got the idea, we're like, okay, we should propose a show there and see if they'd let us do it. And they totally were like, yeah, let's do it. And we gathered 7 people that we knew, and we all went and picked site-specific locations to install work. And so I picked the hole. It's like the sort of torture chamber area that if you were misbehaving, you were put down there for 10 days without like food. I mean, you got food and water, but you didn't get to escape until every 10 days you could come out, and if you were okay, then they'd, put you back in there, which is terrible. But I was like, what would I want if I was stuck in this place? And it's like, my first notion was like, oh, I'd love to have a party there and make it this like other place, otherworldly place. And so I made these panels that are about 6 feet tall and about 28 or 30 inches wide. I was thinking of it being like the size of a man, who would have been there, and it was like, on this side it was an all-men's prison, and there was like a big riot, and then they finally separated men and women and like hard criminals from soft criminals, but who would be down there? So there's 8 glitter panels, and I think I bought out all the glitter in Montana from all the Joannes. I like drove to every city, and was like, because I didn't plan ahead. Usually I never do. And I was like, I need more of this royal purple glitter. But anyway, and a disco ball. So you don't have to, I mainly work in clay, but nothing matters. Material doesn't matter. I don't know. Let's see. This is a video of it. it's titled Party in the Hamptons, and that's really something I know nothing about. I've never been to the Hamptons, and it's sort of these two things I know nothing about. I know nothing about solitary confinement, and I know nothing about the Hamptons. And it was like this, where some kind of understanding happened in these two things that I don't know. And it, like thinking, I mean, I'm not comparing it to Rothko's chapel or anything, but I had that similar feeling. It turned into a chapel when I was in there, and I thought it was so quiet and beautiful and serene. And that's the great thing about making art, is that all this unexpected beauty happens. And I didn't think about that at all until after. So I think this piece is called A Simple Complicated Truth. And right now, I guess, is a good time to, like, titles are really important for me. I think about titles usually before I even make the work. Like, either I write it on my wall or I write it on a piece. Like, I have tons of receipts that are like shoved in a drawer that I need to go back and organize, and I have full notebooks that have just all kinds of crap everywhere, and nothing is organized in my life, but I keep these titles. They're ever present. And A Simple Complicated Truth came like a year before this piece even happened. And I look at David Hockney a lot and different painters, and this resulted as, it's kind of turned into like an ode to David Hockney. And with all these items in the room being these sort of talismans for a person, like they're very particular, and there's a self-portrait in there. And I was like I make all kinds of things without knowing where they go or what they mean. I never make a plan. Like it was really that I had to make a decision. The show was happening in like 2 weeks, and I was like, oh my God, okay, this is what's happening. But sometimes things just like click and all become clear. And this is titled A Very Long Meeting, and they were intended as two self-portraits, but I think that they're not both self-portraits. I look at it now and think maybe it's like me and my partner Jeff, I don't know. Or like me as dual, both genders. I think a lot about that. And the funny thing about, it's weird being a human, and it's weird being like a sexed human. I don't know, it's very strange. So they're ceramic frames and painted paintings with hair on them. And I've been braiding a lot of hair for a while, probably, I guess, a year and a half, and it's synthetic hair, because I really would love real hair, but I can't afford real hair that length, so I'm like, it's all like Sally Beauty Supply hair. But there's something like meditative and wonderful just about, like, when I don't understand what I'm doing, I'll just start braiding this hair. So I've got all these braids resulting from, maybe it's like a frantic anxiety or something, but I want to do something with that hair. And since it's laying everywhere, there's great things to play with. Like, I always have dead fruit laying around my studio. It's like the thing you really want to eat, but then you just let rot. I don't know, like a banana or an apple or an orange, it ends up just dying. So I usually just end up nailing a nail into the wall and stabbing that dead piece of fruit on there and seeing how long it takes to shrivel up. Which, like, I had an apple on my wall, and it took like a good year to like get smaller. It was crazy. Bananas are much faster, but that was an orange, and I was like, how can I make this orange last longer? So I coated it in like green acrylic paint, and it lasted a lot longer, but it started like drooling out the back and smelling. So I was like, okay, I got to get rid of it or whatever. But it's one of my favorite colors of green, which is like called hooker's green. I don't know, hooker's green. But my first apartment in Helena, Montana, was this really weird place. Like, there were people living under us, we were living on top, and then we shared this basement that had like that would flood, and it had the like washer dryer in it. But the neighbor catty corner to us, he was so strange. I was always kind of watching him in a weird way. It sounds creepy, but I got up to get a drink of water at night, and it was like 3 in the morning, and I looked out the window, and I was like, oh my God, what is he doing? He's standing outside with a ski mask on, staring out into the yard. So I like get on a chair and take a picture of him, but like I didn't turn my phone sound off, so like, you know, he hears the noise of the camera going, and I was like, oh my God, I like hide. And then I'm like, who's weird now? Like, probably me, you know, like here. But what made me start like being curious about who he was he would like get out and vacuum the yard, like with an extension cord from his apartment. Like I would have not thought anything about him if he wasn't vacuuming the yard. And I was like, what is he sucking up? I don't know. And like, but we had like all these deer that would like bed down in the backyard, and there were tons of like little rabbits and stuff. It's like, maybe he's vacuuming up the poop. I don't know. But anyway, that's sort of like things like observing people inspires me. That could be. And this piece is titled Sugar Baby, Take Him, These Ants Are Gonna Sting Me Sure as the World. And those were my dad's. Well, it's kind of, you don't know what's like truth or fiction. My dad tells me those were his first words, which I was like, that's a really nice sentence for, you know, however. But he was like 4 or 5. He's really dyslexic, so I was like, okay, maybe. He's like, my mom would always call my dad Sugar Baby and call me him. So he was like, I was fixing to get bit by a bunch of ants. So I was like, okay, truth. But that's what this piece is sort of about, that like kind of, well, to me it's like about a meditative perseverance about things that like are difficult or that you don't understand in your everyday world and things like that. And with this piece, it even became more so. Like after I fired it, I build things with this like irreverent kind of notion where like everything can just go to hell, and usually it does a lot. And so the base was like teeny tiny like that, and it was like, it just fell over in the kiln and like stuck to the wall, and I opened the kiln and was like, oh my God, I like have to leave. And then a friend of mine was like, okay, let's get a angle grinder or a masonry saw and cut the bottom off and try to figure it out. And out of like, I don't know, the best things come out of that struggle, or what we think is good is usually not the end. There's never an end until like, I don't know how to say something's done sometimes, but usually the work tells you when it's done, I think. But anyway, and I was rolling these sticks for like a year, and another artist, he came by my studio and he's like, why are you rolling all these sticks? I was like, I don't really know. I'm not really sure yet. And he was like, it's all about pleasure. And so I sort of think it's about pleasure. Yeah. Sticks. And this piece is called First Impressions Are the Worst, which is pretty true, at least for me, I think. There's, you know, like usually sometimes interactions, like you realize that your face hurts after you leave, and I realize those are the most uncomfortable interactions, like when you realize you've been like posturing so long, and you're like, oh God, gotta get out of here, I wanna go hide and like just stare at the wall or something. So this piece is a lot about like that kind of anxiety, and it took a while to like work through. I was painting this big backdrop, and I was like, I'm gonna photograph myself in front of this backdrop, and I didn't quite know what that meant, and I was just like thinking about this place that I wanted to go, and that I wanted to be, and it was this like kind of weird Teletubby land place. But and I was making this wig too the whole time, and I was thinking about posturing, like Mata Hari. I love her. She was a spy. Well, I don't think she really was a spy. I think it was an excuse to then. She was shot by a firing squad, which is pretty like beautiful and dramatic. I was like, if I could be shot by a firing squad, that would be nice. You know, like if you had any way to die, that'd probably be the best. But and this is at the Cloisters in New York, and it's a medieval museum, and I used to, it's like usually we hate the things we don't understand. And I think that that's what I thought a lot about. Like, I don't necessarily know if I understand medieval art or that time because I'm not from then, but I think it's really beautiful now to me. And it's something that took me time to like appreciate. And I want to go back there and look at that. But that's just a close-up. There was an apple in my mouth, and I kept shopping for all these apples, like to get the best apple from all the grocery stores. But I was walking to my car. Sometimes an idea happens just by my everyday life influences the things I'm doing. Like I shoved an apple in my mouth because I needed to get my keys out of my pocket, and I was like, this is what the answer is. That there's this like, just like like stopping is what I kind of felt it as. Like this is the wig. And I worked at a museum, at the Holter Museum of Art when I was in Helena for 2 years. And there was a space it was like this ugly space that was painted blue and had carpet in it. And I was like, this should be a gallery. So I convinced the director to I was like, I'll head this up, I'll do this. And I realized if you work for a nonprofit, you can ask people for anything. So I called Home Depot and was like, hey, I need some flooring donated. And they're like, write a proposal and come give it to us. And I went there and got the flooring donated. And then that's Jeff, my partner, we cut it and installed it. And I repainted the walls. And we made this 24-hour gallery that's still there. It's cool, but I've installed my work first, and it's a big self-portrait. And I was thinking about this fruit, and fake fruit sometimes is hard to find, even though you wouldn't think so. But I was driving in the car and I was like, I need this fruit really bad right now. And I detoured and went to the thrift store, and there were 5 bags. And it was the weird stuff too, like the artichokes and things that are more rare. Bananas are really rare. I only could find 1 banana. But yeah, self-portraits. And my brother and I didn't think about art at all that much when I was a lot younger, but we would do this activity, and it was mainly his idea. He was obsessed with Mortal Kombat, and so he would have me pose in the pictures and take pictures, and that couch became many wrestling forts and things, and then draw. And but he had my mom buy a red permanent marker just for blood, and she was like, he's probably going to be a serial killer. But he's not a killer. He's an art teacher, and he's. But I was like, this is contemporary art we were doing then. And I think about the associations of that, and the beauty of blood and things in tapestries are so beautiful to me. I don't know. I never really realized. There's something that how thread can render that is really nice. And the way that animals are. But more self-portraits. I continually do them. Anytime I begin to paint, usually it always turns into some kind of plant or self-portrait. And they're always evolving in this place that I want to be. That plant was in my studio forever, and I finally killed it because I was too lazy to repot it, which is really rude. I love plants. I have so many plants in my life, and I hated that I killed it. But and this is I was trained as a potter, so in my undergrad it was all pots, all vessels, and I think that's why I love the vessels so much, because growing up there was no handmade appreciation. My parents still don't know what to do with anything I try to give them, or they don't even understand what I do. So it's a very strange thing. My mom's like, where are you going to Oregon for? It's okay, whatever. But I thought this was kind of funny. It's just picture in a picture is how I think about it, which is... And this piece is titled, It's Almost Too Familiar, and the title came from talking to my mom on the phone. She was like, she always asked me, when are you coming back to Texas? And I was like, I don't know. And after I hung up, my first thought was it's almost too familiar, and I was like, oh God, that's a good title. Wrote it on the wall, and made this piece. And I was wondering what it, like a lot of things come out of like wondering what it would feel like to do something. Or I started chainsawing a bunch of wood in the back where I was, and thinking about like just different ways of like this, exhibiting work, or like how does this stump function? How does this function? And I don't necessarily know if it like works or what it is, but I enjoy it. So, and those are more self-portraits, I think, with hair. I'm really interested in like how we frame things, and it sort of goes in, how we frame a conversation, how we contextualize things, So that's a big urn. And the reason why the work scaled up is really that I wanted a bigger gesture. Like, I think that like you can't do this on like something that's this, like you need something that's this. So if you're thinking, like what would feel good, like I bought this giant paintbrush from Home Depot. Usually I like to just buy things thinking about their potential, and I destroyed it because it was like $5, whatever. But like it's, and that's what resulted out of like, I bought that paintbrush and I was like, I want a bigger gesture. And I was like, I need a bigger piece. So it grew out of that. And like plants, I just love plants. And so I'm constantly photographing them wherever I go. And it sounds like, well, I look online for plane tickets to places, like if they're on sale or something, and Hawaii came up as like, I got a cheap ticket to Hawaii, and I was like, this sounds real bushy or whatever, but no. I go to Hawaii and I sleep in a tent for $35 a day. You can do things like weird like that. I was at a yoga retreat, and but the plants there were like the Home Depot section, like blown up times 1,000. Like it's like real there. Like it's only our imagination here. It's like real. And so I was blown away. I was blown. And lost fruit. Does anybody notice this? Like it's a phenomena that happens everywhere. People leave things everywhere. Like there was an orange that was at K-State on a bench for probably like a week and a half, and it kept moving. Like someone was sitting down and it kind of moved a little, but I came across this banana on a bench, and I didn't take it. It was perfectly good. I could have eaten it instead of eating somewhere else. That would have been free lunch. But the other one was just dead in a parking lot at night. It was actually near the jail. Like I don't know, maybe someone like it was frantic banana situation, but. Yeah. So painting is, I love to paint. I don't know. It like the understanding of, now I really like, before I was like painting as a regular part of my practice, I never like quite understood material love as when I started painting. Like I found that like there's this total like moment of, I don't know what it is. It's like where everything's like quiet and beautiful and wonderful when you like are mixing that right shade or laying it down. And that's what I get from painting. And I like woke up, this was like sometimes it's like things have to happen. I woke up at like, took a little nap and I slept too long. It was like 9 p.m. And I like woke up and ran to the, drove to the studio and was like, and worked till like 3 to like just working on lots of stuff. So I think just got to do what makes sense. And this is, on top is Jean Cousteau's apartment. He's a French artist and poet. And I fantasize about him. I don't know who he was, but and this down here is my parents' look out the patio window growing up. And I kept staring at this, wondering like what it means. Like there's a hose hanging off the roof, and there's a lot of junk in the backyard. You just can't see it in this picture. But like he always puts a hose up on the roof in summer to like water the house and the yard around it, like to try to cool the house off, but it just looks like crazy people. And he's always getting called in, like, from this to the city from neighbors and things. But like, this piece resulted out of that sort of like longing too, and this one's titled "Remind Me of the Way You Stood There." I was thinking a lot about my mom. Growing up, she started a balloon business because my dad was always saying we're going down the toilet. Like, he was he still is, makes crown and bridge work, a dental technician, but in that, like going down the toilet, she was like, okay, I got to start a business too. And so she made a balloon business, but she was always smoking and like on the calculator and like talking on the phone at the same time, like in the kitchen, and like snapping at us when we would be too like loud. And that like made me so, I don't know, I didn't love that moment, but like thinking back about that time, like we can't go back to, made me so like nostalgic. And it's like, okay, it's time to like paint home. And so that's what this turned into be. And it looks sort of like a Southern California scene or something, but it's Dallas. And I don't know, the vessel is like, it's bodily, and thought of that as like a stand-in for a person having like a runway. But that's just a studio shot that was my glamorous studio when I was in that residency, but I work on lots of things at once. I guess that's what it sort of resembles to me. Like, I never am just like working on one piece forever. It's like I'm working on like 6 pieces at one time, so everything's like all crazy, and that's just the way I work. I don't know about anybody else, but yeah. This is my dad's plaster bench downstairs, which is really like crazy and disorganized, but I liken it to, like, that's his studio, and like stuff comes out of it. The same like my studio or anybody else's studio. It's a total trash hole most of the time, but stuff comes out of it. Those are people's teeth. And I love to make plates, and mainly like plates, pitchers, and cups. Like, there's something kind of, I don't know, like they need each other. Like, you can't just have one. Like, they don't work like that. Like, you've got to have more. And, there's like, one of these plates would look like shit by itself, I would think. Like, it needs something else. It needs that other one. It's kind of like, it needs those cactus plates. It's like a composition. Pictures. And I treat material like very irreverently. Like, I use maiolica. It's a old ancient like Italian technique with white glaze, and then you paint. It's like very painterly. Cups. I think of these as tiny paintings. Like, they take the most focus, I think, out of anything that I do. There's like this, like, they need it. They need that attention. Small things are the hardest, I think, And I don't know, Spanish folk pottery is like the bomb. I think if anybody, all should fall in love with Spanish folk pottery. It's just, there's like this, I think it's in that repetition. There's like, in crazy repetition, it becomes a dance, and there's so much like possibility. And I think I like take that from, I don't know, I feel like probably my training as a potter in undergrad, it was just like work. There was no like preciousness to anything. It was like, Elmer, my undergrad professor, he recently passed away, but he had an ugly stick that he would destroy your work at critique with it. Like, and I remember that was like, like nothing matters, and just make. You know, there's nothing but just like, maybe go back to like John Cage or that Sister Coretta Kent. She was a nun. You should look her up. It's a good lecture. But yeah. And this piece, I had all these peonies in my studio. I think peonies and ranunculus are my favorite flowers of all time. And they were like right at that moment of like, you know, when a flower, like it just bloomed out so much and then it's going to die the next day. And I was like, oh God, I got to go take a picture. So I drug it down the hall and took a picture. And then it's just interesting to me that it looks like a painting, like it looks like some kind of, you know, Dutch still life or something. And I was making all these urns for a while, and this urn was from my mom, and not like in the sense, they don't want to be cremated, but I keep trying to convince them to be cremated, which sounds weird, but it's like very tall, like, you know, we don't, when we're cremated, we only become like that big or something, very tiny, like dust and just bits, and probably tons of other people, and I don't know if they do dogs and stuff at the same place, but maybe animals, I don't know, but anyway, like I made this like monumental thing, like with that, and then one for my dad. My dad's is a black one, and but there's something else about this piece that was, and it's like it got broken in shipping. It's like gone to the world, which is so sad, you know. It's kind of like another thing that can like never come back. That's just a piece of foil that I painted, which I don't know. I think it's like nice making these things out of stuff that means nothing, you know. And I just have to put this in. It's Richard Tuttle. It's one of his from his Fabric Octagonal series, and he's like my art hero. I love him. He like has made me think about looking in a whole nother way, and that's what I want to do with my work. You know, there's like, it's not just like things aren't what they seem, you know. And I love that the idea of like looking. When I first went to, or was introduced to his work, it was 2006 at the Dallas Museum of Art. And I like completely walked by this stuff. I was like, what is this or whatever? And then it made me think, and I had to go back. And then I became obsessed. And yeah, and it's really great when you meet somebody that's just as good as their work. Like I met him in Denver at a talk, and I was too scared to even go up to him. But a friend of mine was like, you are a nutcase if you don't, and like shoved me over there. And he was just as kind as his work, you know. It was great. He gave me a hug, which I'm like, so nice. Of course, I was like crazy and adrenaline driven and said that he saved me and all this weird stuff. But, you know, you know, whatever, you know. Let me go back. Okay, and Rousseau, I think Henri Rousseau is a big influence on me, in that he painted all these imaginary places. Like, well, that's, from all that I've read about him, he never traveled to these exotic destinations. They were all from magazines and different kinds of things that he collected. And I don't know. It's like it's better than real life. I think sometimes our memories are better than real life. This is Matisse. He's a big influence to me in the way that he sees things. And this is my favorite painting of all time. It's at the Met in New York, and I was introduced to it in a class in undergrad and in art history, and I was like, oh, I became obsessed, and I finally got to go visit this painting, and it's even better in real life. And I took this photo. It's Ang, and a woman in a blue dress. And Etruscan pottery is really big, just like Spanish folk pottery. It's really good. It's just beautiful. There's like nothing else. These things. And I was like, the real truth about this work is that I was becoming frustrated. Like, sometimes being a woman really sucks. Like, and I was just like, this is stupid or whatever. And I was like, I'm just going to put some flowers on it. And I think that, I don't know, nothing has to be so hard. And I'm going to end with this train tunnel. Like when I first moved to Montana, all I would do every day was go to the bar and drink because I didn't know anybody. And I would talk to people at the bar. And this guy told me about this train tunnel that was abandoned. And he's like, you should go through it. We walked through it. But I got there with my partner, Jeff, and we went through it. We didn't walk through it. We drove through it, which ended up being real scary because when we got to the middle, like the water was almost up to the door, like we were in a Jeep. I was like, oh my God, we're going to fall into a pit and die. But we persevered, and we made it through the tunnel. And on the other side, there were just a bunch of cows and trash and stuff, so it wasn't that exciting. But it was a neat adventure. So that's how I like to think about working and living, you know. You never know what's going to be on the other side. Just got to keep going. But yeah, thanks for coming. Yeah. I don't know, do you have any questions?
I'm curious about how you decide to pair things together, like in the gallery or when you're just photographing them to document them. Is it a similar process to the way you have this relationship to your everyday world where they kind of live in your space and then you kind of pluck them and put them together, or is it conceived like with the title way in advance?
No, I think it's just like things start accumulating, and as you're working, or as I'm working, there's like series start forming. Like I start realizing like, okay, this belongs here and this goes here. Like that, it all starts making sense, and that's what. And sometimes things like a lot of times with painting, like I'll be painting something and I'll be making the other like things in front of it, and I'm like, oh, this, like, and I think it like influences it. Like there's no way that I could have like some kind of painting studio and some kind of ceramic, even though it's like terrible to have the two together because like clay is so freaking dirty, like it's terrible. Like I work in red clay, so it's even worse. But I just like have to constantly try to, you know, move things around and make clean spaces to. I have to see everything all happening at once, I think, or it doesn't make sense. Yeah, it doesn't. But yeah.
You probably coil. Do you coil? And,
oh yeah, I do.
And do you make piles of coil before you begin, so you get to work, or you take a breather and make coils in the middle of your work? And I was wondering, I couldn't quite catch. Are those glazes or in gobi or a mixture of both? Tell me something about your process.
Okay, most of them are the glazes. It's like I use a Maiolica glaze, which is a white glaze, and so you're like putting that on your bisqueware, and then you can take like under glazes or make, like I use frit and mason stain or color it and mix it. The stain is 1 part to 3 parts frit to make. And you can mix them like paint. Like they're, like mason stains are created for like coloring bricks and things and swimming pools and all kinds of stuff, but they are used in the ceramic field. And so I use a lot of that. And then oxides, you know, there's like chrome and cobalt and all, like the best blue ever is, you know, cobalt. Like it's just so delicious and good. And I do the same thing, mix that like 1 part cobalt to 3 parts frit. And you can use any kind of frit, like 3124 is what I use. It's ferro frit. But yeah, that and coiling. I don't like make a bunch of coils. I dig things out. Like I make a big block and then I dig the bottom out and then pinch. Like always start with some kind of like bowl shape that could be. Like I think about where it's going, and sometimes I don't, and then that's where I end up being in danger of like, oh, this is way too small for where I think I'm going, you know. But And then I just make really fat coils by squishing clay, like turning it over. And it's tedious, but there's a lot of waiting. Like you get to a point where everything's too wiggly and you have to I'll just wrap that top coil with a piece of plastic and let it hang out for however long it needs to. And so it's another reason for working on multiple things at once, because you've got a lot of it's like watching paint dry, sort of. But yeah, I don't know if that answers. But yeah.
I'm curious to hear if you would talk a little bit more about the not planning ahead and the kind of point where you're forced to make a decision, like when it clicks or when it doesn't click, and how do you handle that?
That's like a question. I don't know how to answer that necessarily.
Except if it's never happened where it doesn't click.
When it doesn't, you just have to keep usually I'll if I'm sitting in the studio really frustrated, I have to leave, and then I'll leave, maybe go take a walk, and then I come back. But if there's times you just have to leave the studio, or else nothing gets done. It's the studio practice is made up of many things, of cleaning, doing many tedious life things, and usually if things happen I was at work, just really frustrated because I was at work and I needed to finish this piece because the deadline was coming. But in that time, I was is when I had a moment I know what I'm gonna do with it. So sometimes we need to just relax and try not to worry so much. I just was eating lunch. But the simple, complicated truth was now I know I need to go. But then I was I need to find a table. Where do I find a table? So it's there's that, and knowing when something's done. That's the hardest part. But you really have to. You have to trust yourself and the intuition of we all can. School is a great place to know where to stop. That's where I think I owe a lot of my editing skills and things to grad school. It's that was when I first started thinking about you can make tons of things, but then at the end you have to know what belongs and what doesn't belong. That you don't need everything. You don't need to try to show someone that you've been working for making so much shit. That doesn't mean anything. It's just about the story. That's what it's about. But, yeah.
Any other questions? What is it about the Aang painting that makes it your favorite? It seems like a bizarre choice.
It's that blue dress. The blue dress is so, the way that fabric is rendered is so beautiful. And that's a good thing, is that we don't always have to be interested in something that maybe looks just like our work or what we're interested in. There's beauty everywhere, and it could just be in I don't know. It can be very classical, or it could be Weird Al song or something terrible like that. But it's nothing. There's no prescription for what we should be interested in or not interested in.
That's again having your eyes open.
Yeah. Always keep your eyes open. Or else you're just gonna trip and fall.
On a banana.
On a banana.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you so much. Join us next